get too close to the microphone and scream down my own ears. So, here we go. This is only the second time that I've presented this talk, and even today I was adding more finishing touches to it. It's still in a very basic state. I could go on and on and on about it, but I have to keep it to a certain time limit of about an hour. Of the Jodrell estates, it's the first sale of the Jodrell estates, and I thought, oh my goodness, well there was another sale in 1923, so what's this 1832 sale all about? And that is when I found that I was landed in this mysterious place. The mystery emerged. As you can see there, that's how I felt. In order to work out where everybody was, where the houses were, who written what, I had to go right back to the very beginning of Taxal, way back in time, hundreds of years. And I ended up challenging previous historians' opinions. And that felt very strange, but with the advance of technology and information, I've now got something on that first historian. There was only a couple. And that's what I'm going to be explaining to you. The evidence I've got, maps, aerial maps, old maps, documents in the form of these letters, materials, I've found materials, mortar. I'm going to talk about the people involved and their place in this story, which is an 800-year-old story. Are you intrigued? Yes. This is going to be the short version. Like I said, I could go on forever. But let's start. This is Taxal Lodge as we now know it. We only think was one, but no, there weren't. This was Taxal Lodge when it was first built in 1904. Beautiful building. But I know so much about it now, stuff you can't imagine, which has come to light in all of this research. This was the map that was sent to David and I from when the Jodrell estate went up for sale in 1832. Why that year? Well, you'll find out eventually. It was set out in 28 separate lots. And you'll see there in 1832, up for 28 separate lots. Lot 14, the lodge, is here. Can you all see that there? Lodge 14 was there. Shallcross, designated as Lot 1 for a reason, was there. Can you see that the semicircular trees that signifies Shallcross? There's a reason for the semicircle as well, as you'll soon discover. And that was at a considerable size to the Taxal estate. Only that's in Derbyshire, and this is in Cheshire. So why? Lot 28, right up here, at the side to the right of the Roman road there, Embridge Causeway, was purchased by Samuel Grimshaw, who built Irwood Hall on the site, again, in about 1834. So the map is based on the east-west direction, that's it pointing north, but because it's a long strip of a property, they had to put it out, lay it out on this level here. So, something on that map stood out to me that made me go, what on earth is that? I spotted it straight away. And throughout, there are a couple of things that have stayed exactly the same throughout all of the map series up until now. The first one is Linglong's Road. The second one is this triangular piece of land here, going up to Lanehead Farm. There it is and there it is. Lodge Cottages as what it is now, there and there. And this shape here. This shape here.
Can you dance, Chris? Can you just dance around so we can just see that corner of the map along this side as you said it?
Oh, right, okay.
Thank you.
And you just turn me finger
That'll
around.
do. You can see.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So there's Linglong's, there's Linglong's. So this is an 1832 map. and it was updated in 1839. It just was a nice posh coloured in map. Like me, it likes its colours, colour coding. You'll see a network of paths going in the estate there. But as I say, these three things stayed the same. Lodge cottages, Linglongs Road, and the triangular corner, and this piece of structure here, this wall, which is there and there. So I thought, well, it doesn't look like that now. Why is that like that? So I went to my favourite website, the National Library of Scotland, side-by-side maps. If anybody likes the maps, go to this. It's a fantastic resource. They're always adding to it. You can make side-by-side comparisons of maps today, and your cursor moves along, and you just change the map to whatever year you want there. It's fantastic. So I looked at all of these maps, and I thought, right, I'll go and find all of this shape. So there we are, the 1832. There's the Linglongs, the triangle, lodge cottages, that strange piece of land there. And then here, another 1892 between. Maps didn't change that often. They didn't change the series, so I can't pinpoint them exactly to a date. So here we have the triangular piece of land, Linglongs, lodge cottages, and this is what I call the boat-shaped piece of land, because it's got like a round hull there, very square end there. So that stays throughout there, 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 and there, where it shows a school in 1960, 61. So what's happened here? Why is there nothing there, but something here? What's happened here? And what's happened to a certain structure? And that was the mystery. Right, I'll try and... The screen's just gone a bit too far over to the side there. So in the auction of 1832, this is where I've cropped down the map and to point out certain things there. So the map was west-east oriented. You'll see there Macclesfield Road, bottom of Macclesfield Road, Horwich End, Elner Lane there. There's the Cromford and High Peak Railway. Yep, Shallcross Manor. There's Shallcross Manor Hall. Going down the lane, back lane to Long Hill. Pitbank Colliery, which we call Brick Barn as well, which went down to the weir, the bridge at Taxal, up the hill to Taxal Church, the few buildings there in Taxal, and then there is that mysterious building. What on earth was that? So, this building, you can see it's greyed out. That means it's not occupied, or it's not really there anymore, but the remains of it are. So why would they include this? Something strange. Which hall was this? This walled garden there, that's a 10-foot walled garden. It's a very steep slope down to the bottom, down to the river there. The River Goit, see how it snakes its way through the valley bottom there? At this point here, the river does some massive big loops. Now the river, up to this point, is the boundary between Cheshire and Derbyshire, which we all know. And from this point on, it's the boundary between Derbyshire and Cheshire as well. But at this point here, this yellow line is the boundary between Derbyshire and Cheshire, which means that this landowner here owned the river here. Now bear that in mind for later, because I'm going to be mentioning this. So there it is, and there's the shape there. So what on earth was it? I had to wind up back all the way to the first people who occupied the whole of Taxal parish, which stretched from far beyond up to the Roman road, right down to Furness Vale. It was part of the Forest of Macclesfield Forest. The late 13th century saw the area granted to a family called the Downes, or the Downes family of Taxal. They were foresters to the king in the Palatine of Cheshire. On the other side of the river in Derbyshire, the same grant was given to the Shallcross family, the Shacklecrosses, by the king, again, for services rendered in war times. So it's a similar kind of story. The Downs or the Dunes of Cheshire is a French word. It's a French word, Dunes, the Dunes, that's an area in France. They would have come over with in the invasion of 1066. One of the Downses was the first rector in the Norman church of Taxal Church. That's how long a church has been there, since those times. They were foresters to the king. That was a really prestigious title. You were really high up the rank if you were a forester. The forest was a hunting grounds for the kings. It wasn't just a wooded area, it was the entire region, the king's hunting grounds. The land was in the Forest of Maxfield in the County Palatine of Chester. The Earl of Chester was Edward I, Longshanks. So this was all his favourite hunting ground. The Downses held seats at Overton in Malpas, and in Shrigley eventually, and Sutton Downs in Macclesfield. We know Sutton now in Macclesfield. It's at the side of it, but it used to be called Sutton Downs because there was a manor of the Downs family and the house of the Suttons in Macclesfield. One of the Downses, John, was a co-signee of the regicide of Charles I. These people were really high up the ladder. Their heraldic sign is the white stag on a black shield. Again, there's another story to that, but I haven't got the time to go into this too much. There were 14 male heirs, and it was the father and son of the last heir that sold the estate in 1691, between 1691 and 1703. It took a while. So again, I've gone to great length to condense down all of the information from Earwaker's explaining of the Downs family. It's in pages and pages and pages of documents where they've gone into the archives and catalogued everything, the names, the people, and the inquisitions. These inquisitions were after somebody died with titles, and they laid out all of the lands that they inherited, monies that they owed, and what was going to be inherited by the next heirs. So there you see Robert de Dunes, 12th Norman Earl. One died without issue, that means without any children. And it's going all the way through, so it tells you a little bit about what they inherited. They held the domain of manors of Taxal and Downes, as it was called in those days. And then here, further on, John the heir of 12, 50 acres of land, so it sets it all out. One of the Downses broke off from the family and established Shrigley Hall. He married into the Shrigleys of Shrigley Hall. So all these people all married within other titled positions. It was a way of keeping all the money together, wasn't it, in one place? Money and land, of course. John of Overton, that's where Overton starts coming in as well. And there, Reginald too, they just carried on using the same names again. I don't know why they didn't change, but that was the thing in those days, wasn't it? You carried your father's name or your mother's name. So there were 3 Reginalds, 4 Reginalds, 3 Johns, so many of them. Bringing it down to the last 2, 13 and 14. John 3 married a lady called Sarah. She had 4 girls, Margaret, Mary Ann and Sarah. This here, rested of estate, was because this chap, his brother, said girls can't inherit the title. So he claimed, he just stole the title off these girls and claimed the heirship. He had 2 sons, Reg and Edmund 5, and a girl. Who cares about the girl? Nobody. So here we have John 3 and Reginald, Edmund 4, Reginald 4. With his father, Edmund 4, these 2 sold the entire estate of Taxal and the manor to John Shallcross across the river between 1691, let's call it 1700, to round it off. This was the end of the Downs reign. Finished, gone. Any name around here that carries the Downs surname originates from this family. It's unique to this area. So what's the evidence for Taxal Hall? There's a brochure flying around in certain places, one in a copy in Whaley Library, called The History of Overton Hall. The information was taken. The information was taken from Erica, I don't know, History of Cheshire, and Ormerod's History of Cheshire. These were the only two people who were writing this in those days. It's changed now. Earwaker didn't know he was making a mistake. He was only going off previous documents. I doubt he ever went to Taxal and spoke to the people. But it's been copied by other people ever since 1880. I'm changing the record now. As the Downes family declined, lands, messuages were sold, including at one part a hunting lodge. That hadn't been mentioned at all in any of the other inquisitions. We've got a couple of local authors in Whaley Bridge, David Jackson and his father Arthur Jackson. Some of you may know him and remember him. Well, David's written three books called about Whaley Bridge. And this first one, Stepping into the Past, part one, Glimpses of Taxal. That became my Bible. It was my go-to. There was so much information that David had researched and gone into detail. His father, having worked at Taxal Lodge number 3. So, here was my evidence. So, the Down, and in the Downs listing, it mentions a hunting lodge, maybe Taxal Hall. After the sale of the estates to John Shallcross in 1700, let's call it that, the Elizabethan half-timbered lodge, David Jackson's words, not mine, was used by the next landlords as their country residence. It was used for hunting, fishing, proximity to Buxton Spa, because rich and the titled, very wealthy people in those days, they were all flocking to these spa resorts for all their ailments, but it was also a social gathering. It was all kind of, you know, the one-up, only rich people could go and afford to spend a month in Buxton, having water treatment, etc. It's mentioned in a letter that there were pleasure grounds with a pretty rivulet at the rear. Well, that isn't up at Overton Hall. People think that Overton Hall was the seat of Taxal Hall. It isn't. It wasn't. The design of it was a cross shape, sized like Taxal Church before its upgrade in the late 19th century. So going back to our first map there of 1832, there's Lodge Cottages, where Sheila lives, over there, and you'll see this structure here. Look at the size of it. It's got like a cross shape, isn't it? It's like a flat cross. It's got a connection there to this very strange piece of vacant land. I found some pictures of period houses around this time, and they were half timbered. So it's a low layer of brick course, and then the rest was entirely out of wood. There's one of sale in Timperley, Cheshire. So you can see how, I mean, that's a really good example. Here's another one there. So you could easily just stick another piece on and grow it and grow it. That's what people did. They just stuck an extension on like we do nowadays, don't we? I found some lime mortar at the side here on what's now the lawn at Taxal Lodge. Sheila and I go ferreting around there every now and again. And in molehills, which are only on one side of this piece of ground, only on one side, pieces of mortar started coming up out of the, in the molehills. So you can pass this around, you can see some of these pieces of mortar. They are not anywhere else at all. Lime mortar was used to stick bricks together, wasn't it? Oh. One second. Oh no. What have I done? Oh no. David, pause it. I know that there was an extension built in 1794. And so I was asking, was the lodge, Downes' hunting lodge, built behind Taxal Hall Farm? I kind of suspect that this lodge here was already a farm, and finds there and structure shows it was built around the time of a lot of farms in the area, around about the beginning of the 1600s. Certainly Overton Hall farm up on the top of the moors there, that had a restructure, but its origins started probably around the 1600s as well, when the Downeses upscaled everything. So things are beginning to get more complicated. The next era was the gentry of the 18th century, between 1730 and 1797. Brass and blood means nothing to you for the time being. When the Downeses sold off all of their estate, John Shallcross bought, no it wasn't, sorry I do beg your pardon, a rich Manchester merchant, a royalist who had a hotel in the middle of Manchester, and he accommodated the young king from Scotland. Was it called the Young Pretender? Yeah. He accommodated him. They were a very, very rich family. They lived in Birch Hall in Rusholme, above which now is Manchester Grammar School. And, like I said before, they kept the same name in the family. So I've named them John 1, 2 and 3. So John was a very rich Manchester merchant. They had all of the site of Birch there in Rusholme, and they were proper landlords and tenants. They had farms, they were raising horses, they were raising crops, they were raising timber. Very, very rich. John 2 bought Taxal from John Shallcross in 1758 because the Downeses sold it all to John Shallcross when they gave up. So John Shallcross sold it on, and he raised his family of 5 in Taxal till about 1790. I'll go into depth. And this is Birch Hall, and you can see what I mean about buildings growing on. You see the half-timbered one there, which is round the side of it? This part here is that there. And there's lots of paintings and photos, and it was a very, very pretty house. So why wouldn't something like that have been the same at Taxal? Of course, it makes sense. John, his son 3, was called Jack as well, which makes it a bit easier. They sold it with his wife, who was this lady here, Mary Hamilton. They had a daughter called Louisa, and the diaries and letters of John and Mary are now online at Manchester University. Not just John and Mary, but John 1, 2 and 3, and Mary. Their daughter and her descendants have inherited all of these diaries, and they've all been transcribed and put on the Manchester University's website for anybody to read. And that's where a huge amount of knowledge has come from, and insight to this. So you see that John 2 is highlighted there, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of information talk a little about John. I'm just going to dip into John's mind via his letters. There we go. So, a bit of breakdown. He married Sarah Cheetham of Mellor. They had 6 children, one who died young. They bought Taxal in 1758, which included a corn mill, coal mines, that was up at Irwood, the colliery there, 4 kilns he had at Buxton. He had a timber forest, farms, game, fishing. He was a formidable businessman. He kept meticulous account books and diaries, and there is a little bit of one of the account books, and you see at the bottom there it says timber at Taxal, £2, 2 shillings and £2 and 2 shilling. 2 what? A situation arose in 1780 which led to the end of the Dickinson era, and this again I found out through their letters. It was a dispute over water, coal and land, with the neighbours over the field at Shallcross. Remember I told you where the river didn't follow the line of the county boundary at one point, and it's all to do with that. And here in 1780, the story kind of starts, where John Dickinson, Senior, writes to Mr. Orford, who was the steward of the Lyme estate, which all belonged to the Lees of Lyme at that time. He writes, "Was 2 guineas a year, in your opinion, a full and adequate consideration for all the great and important advantages I was to give Mr. Jackson?" Mr. Jackson was married to one of the 3 heirs of Shallcross Manor. Because they were ladies, they couldn't carry it. So one of them married a Jackson, one never had any children, and the other one never married. So that was the end of the Shallcross people. So Jackson was one of the one's husband. They were very wealthy people from over by Ashbourne. Was it right that I should run every risk to serve a neighbour and bring all the losses upon myself? I lately proposed to sell forever all the lands necessary for Mr. Jackson's colliery, which would have been of infinite advantage to him. He was fighting about water rights. Pitbank Colliery is one of the oldest collieries in Derbyshire, and it was created by the Shallcross family a long time before this broke out. These letters, these snippets of letters, go on to explain some of the irate letters he wrote to Mr. Orford. He was a very important businessman. He had to have his say. He needed to say something. And it all kind of starts kicking off around that time. I'm just going to try and find you a letter now. There's a lot. He gets very angry. I can hear his anger. He writes very wordy. Why use one word when 20 will do? He really goes into depth and fills out his page of letter there. Let me just see. A letter in 1781 from John Dickinson to Mr. Orford in 7th of November that year. Strange as it is, but it is an undoubted fact, really, that Mr. Jackson, upon his uncle Roger Jackson, could not have sold, nor has he sold, a single basket of fire coal without our assistance for upwards of 40 years, which Jackson can provide by a writing now in my possession. What it was, Jackson wanted to upgrade the colliery and install a water wheel to pump the water out of the colliery. Now, he thought the boundary of his land was the river. However, it wasn't, as I showed you on the map. He wanted to build an extraction wheel and discharge it all into Dickinson's water, that he considered his water. Well, of course, that wasn't on. So Dickinson was very happy to allow him certain privileges, but he wasn't happy at all. So he squabbles and he fights and he falls out until eventually, in 1789, in a letter to Mr. Orford, 11th of November, he's had enough. And he says, "I shall leave and quit Taxal this very day. And as it will be but seldom I shall for the future have the pleasure of seeing you, I take this opportunity of thanking you. My son, whom I have given the property of this place to, will meet you at Macclesfield on the 16th. So after years and years of fighting and squabbling with the Jacksons at Shallcross, he just gives up. He goes back to Birch Hall, leaving Taxal in the hands of his newly married son. He's not poor by any means, but he pleads poverty. He said he's only earned £70 that year and he's got a wife and 4 or 5 children. Not that he's forgotten that he had children, but one of them passed away and his eldest one by then was married. But he was a very wealthy man. He helped give money to the building of the Great New Road, which is Long Hill. So he was very influential. It was also to his advantage because it meant he could get to Buxton easier on time than going over the hills a long way. So that was John Dickinson II. Going back to this one, John III, his son, Jack, this was his wife, Mary Hamilton, and if that name rings a bell, you're probably right. because Mary Hamilton was a very, very well-known, very beautiful, very prestigious, gentry lady connected to the famous Hamilton family. Here she is, Miss Mary Hamilton Dickinson. She was a socialite, she was an aristocrat. She was a member of the Blue Garter, the Bar Bleu Society, which was a society for titled, wealthy, intelligent, artistic young ladies who had no work to go to. They just sat doing all these beautiful things. This was at the time of Georgiana of Chatsworth of Devonshire, who was going down to Bath and causing a scandal in Bath with all of her unsavoury behaviour. Mary was writing about her to her family, saying, have you heard about the Duchess of Devonshire? So these letters give us an absolute insight to the working minds and the idiom of the day and what was going off, the politics of the day. So this is why these letters are just absolutely priceless in the story. She was a friend to her mother-in-law, Sarah Dickinson, way before she was her daughter-in-law. She was a prolific letter writer and diarist, and it's because of her daughter, descendants, that we've now got all these insights into this family. She hosted titled friends and relatives at Taxal, and she died aged 60. And I'd just like to give you a little bit more insight into her. She was born in 1756. Her father was the Honourable Charles Hamilton, who was a soldier. He was the son of Archibald Hamilton, grandson of William Douglas, 3rd Duke of Hamilton. You get the gist. Mary was an only child, and her aunt was Elizabeth Hamilton Greville. Her uncle was Sir William Hamilton, who was a very famous gentleman, who was married twice, as I'll explain shortly. She was a prominent Blue Stocking member, and she was friend, as I say, to her mother-in-law, way before she married her friend's son. They met when Sarah would go down to Northampton. Mary was at school there in Northampton, boarding school, along with Sarah's son, John. So they grew up together, basically. She became a lifelong friend of her mother-in-law. In 1769, Sarah invited Mary, who was only 13 at the time, to Taxal with her camera. I thought, well, when were cameras invented? 18-something, so what is this camera? So I asked somebody, well, it's a camera obscura, isn't it? It's like where they have two mirrors, and you point it and then it shines down the net and you just sketch it out. So they used the word camera for that. What a relief. I thought she was time travelling. So she invited her to paint and draw Taxal, saying it was a beautiful area with a little pretty rivulet at the rear of the house. So she really encouraged her to come up to Taxal. At the time, Queen Charlotte, married to King George III, was looking for a new governess for her many, many children. Did she have 10 children, 15 children? Loads in any case. And she knew Mary, she liked Mary, and invited her to be the governess to these children. So she didn't really want the job, but she couldn't really turn it down because it was the Queen. It was the Queen asking. Letters from John, her school friend, started to turn romantic when they got to be teenagers. Mary cut contact with him though, because suddenly she had a lot of problems with one of Queen Charlotte's sons, the future King George IV, whose over-amorous teenage hormones kind of went into overdrive for the young Mary. He pestered her. He would have been a stalker nowadays. He bombarded her with letters, and it was just too overwhelming for her. She was too polite to say no to him and you know, slap him down. It was just too much. So she wasn't happy in the position. So Mary just cut contact with John because she just couldn't cope with all the adoration. It was too much for her. Frustrated by George IV, teenage George IV, Mary had enough of the role and she left. the Queen was very upset by her leaving. She was a much beloved character. She really made a cut in society. She was very popular. And there you'll see her, one of the sketches, and you'll see her there as a beautiful young lady. And there you'll see her with her husband in later years. She actually was only 60 when she died, and they only had one daughter. The letters reveal why. I've worked out why they only had one daughter. Because she kept on having miscarriages. Her father-in-law writes that it's a shame that Mary has lost another child. So they only had the one who was very treasured. In 1780, when she was 24, Jack Dickinson, still in love with her. She was the only one for him, ever since they were teenagers. He proposed marriage. Now, this was a man from an industrialist family, and she was from the titled position. The two didn't really mix and match because it was new money and old money. So the title people liked to keep it in their classes, which didn't work out very well for the French nobility and the royals, did they? If they'd have mixed in with the industrialists, they might have survived with their royal families there. The 7th Lord Napier, who was Mary's uncle and guardian after her father died, he doubted John's wealth and status, so Mary had to turn him down. She couldn't. Her uncle wouldn't let her marry him. Queen Charlotte allowed her to quit, and she continued to live in London. 4 years later, John proposes again. And this time, she says yes. She was 28 by this time, so no spring chicken. She needed to get married, didn't she, really? She said yes. Going against protocol, which was a bold move in those days, sons and daughters of self-made rich people began merging into gentry and aristocracy, brass and blood. John Dickinson, the father, also had his misgivings like Napier. He felt aware of the social differences of Taxal for his bride, but promoted that it was very near the high society town of Buxton Spa, so he was luring her to Taxal to sell all the attributes that it had. He was trying his best to feather the nest for her, I suppose. Jack promised her, he was very, very forward thinking, he promised Mary that she could still spend time between London, maintaining her circle of very influential, high-class socialite friends. Mary proved herself to be of great intelligence. You'll see. She looked after all the money matters. She was that intelligent, she just ran the whole place. She even made a profit. Her father-in-law was delighted with this. She paid cash for everything. She was such an asset to the family. In 1789, when John, father-in-law, left Taxal in a huff, John the son and Mary were handed Taxal. And they promptly started doing it up, making it look nice, making it all the new fashion. They built a new wing. She was getting letters sent by her friends saying, "Where are you? I want to come and see this. You're spending too much time up there at Taxal. Come down to London." And many eminent people visited, lords, ladies, earls. This is how well connected she was. On one day, in the year 1791, a pair of eminent visitors arrived at Taxal. They travelled all the way from Naples. They'd known each other for 6 years. Emily Leon, also known as Emma Hart, if that rings a bell to anybody, became the mistress of various grandees after climbing the social ladder to prestigious heights from her very humble beginnings. She just was on the climb by having affairs with very rich, famous men. There is a word for it, but I won't say it here. One of the grandees was Mary's beloved uncle, the Right Honourable Charles Greville. Trying to remove her from his realm, he was embarrassed by it, he pushed Miss Hart towards his brother-in-law, the elderly widower Sir William Hamilton. He was an envoy to Naples, who was aged 60 at the time. She was only 26. A British ambassador to Naples, Sir William Hamilton had no heirs. Charles Greville hoped he'd be the heir as long as his uncle remained unmarried. But, and maybe the deal was sealed at Taxal that month, Emma and William Hamilton married in September, a few weeks after their visit to Taxal. So there you go. They set up home in Naples, where Emma soon crossed paths with a very well-known gentleman called Horatio Nelson. And the rest is history, as they say, as far as that story. So the newly enlarged, refurbished Taxal Hall, with its 1,000 acres of land and gardens, was then put up for sale because they didn't want to live in Taxal. They were both from down in Northampton, Leighton Buzzard, they had all those contacts. They just did it up and sold it on. We're still doing things like that, aren't we? We're still doing stuff. Their daughter, Louisa, married Lord Anson. And it's through their descendants that we've now got all this information on this. And it's a fascinating read. They've got a huge length to transcribe all of these hundreds and hundreds of diaries and letters and documents. It's very tiring if you don't know what you're looking for. So that was it. That was the end of the Dickinson era, 1793. The next owner of Taxal was a young gentleman called Foster Bower. He was a very influential Chester recorder, which was a high status barrister. He was a brilliant barrister, as you see there, on the Chester circuit. He came from a more recent Chester merchant family on his mother's side and would have been known to the Dickinsons of Birch in Manchester. The families knew each other. His brother was married to one of the Jodrells of Yeardsley Hall and Henry Hall. In 1794, he buys the Taxal estate from John Dickinson, and he sets about building his new dream. He's only a young man, he's got ambitions, he wants his own countryside residence. He appoints a landscape architect, Thomas White, a Scotsman. He's to plant a timber plantation with 15 tree species, gardens, woodlands. And whilst he was there building his new lodge, he would have used Dickinson's hunting lodge. Of course he would. Makes sense, doesn't it? His brother, John Bower Jodrell, he took the name there, Jodrell, kept it together there. And John Bower Jodrell was married to one of the Jodrells of Yeardsley and Henry Hall. They preferred to stay at Henry Hall there. That was new in 1746. It doesn't exist anymore. Ferrantes bought it and then knocked it down and built the new hall there at Henbury. So he builds it in the new neoclassical design. We have trends of houses, don't we? We go from half timber to Tudor style to the style that we have now. Houses have fashions, and you kind of mark the period with these. And it was the fashion of the day to have columns there, like Greek columns or Roman columns. Big, big rooms. So he wanted to build his own house and have all his landscape garden. A year later, he bought all of Shallcross estate. The Jacksons had had enough. They just went off, they got no interest in it, so they just sold it to him. So now he's got two massive estates to do plantations and gardens and trees in there. A year later, whilst his new house is being built, he dies. He just dies. Don't know why. I don't think I'll ever know why, unless I dig really deep. But he was only aged 36. His house is just about built. His plantation has just got saplings in it. What's to happen? The landscape architect was locked into a contract. He had to keep on doing it because he was being paid. He had a plan. His brother John inherited his estate, but brother John was happily living at Henbury there, and he already had the Yearsley to care about as well. He didn't want this. He didn't want the contract with the landscape bar. He tried to get out of it, but he was held to the deal. He couldn't get out of that. Lo and behold, you wouldn't believe it, but a year later, his brother John also dies. I've looked at their family history. All the men died very, very young, round about 40. So now we've got Shallcross and Taxal with a brand new house, barely finished. And so it goes to the next heir, which is Francis Bower Jodrell. His tombstone is in the wall at Taxal Church. So, what happens to it now? Brand spanking new building, nobody living in it. What are they going to do with it? Nobody wants it. This was his dream here. And this information here comes from the newspapers at the time who were desperately trying to sell this estate. But the current economic crisis at the time in England, nobody wanted the commitment of 1,000 acres of woodland. Nobody could afford it at that time. There was wars and all kinds of things going off. So the newspapers, local and national, were putting out these adverts, along with other such big houses, desperately trying to sell the attributes of Taxal Lodge, of Foster Bower's new lodge. And they give a description there. The drawing room, 27 feet by 18, 30 foot for the eating room, as it's called, 30 foot by 21 foot. Breakfast room, 24 by 18. The gents' parlour, 14 by 18. Servants' halls, housekeepers' rooms. When I went over to Shrigley Hall, I thought, oh my goodness, it must have looked something like this, even with these kind of sizes. So it had a first floor with convenient offices, a dressing room, good bed chambers, times 5. They would have been there. And then on the second floor, rooms for servants, times 5. Up there, the servants' quarters, columns there. It also states that it had large cellars. And this is a key part in my discovery of which house was where. It employs a renowned landscape architect, White, to design the timber forest, and the tree planting is in full swing. Shallcross Hall has got a semicircle of trees. You might have seen it on the map. The reason why is because when Foster Bower died and his brother died, that tree plantation stopped, so only a semicircle was completed. That's why it was. All the woods going through from Taxal lay-by, Shallcross Woods there, Taxal Woods, it stops suddenly at Ferny Lee, and it goes all on Taxal edge, right up to the Roman Road. All of that was Foster Bower's plantation. He had this beautiful dream of making this glorious landscape for himself. So, after the brother's death in 1796-97, the lodge had to be rented out. It was brand new. It was asking for tenants to move in. Samuel Grattrix was one of the last tenants lived there. Samuel Grattrix of the Calico Works in Furnacevale and New Mills. He was one of the tenants. So it was a big deal. In 1830, the sale catalogue of the national papers. So it was about 4 years afterwards. Nobody was interested in it. And they feared that squatters would move in, thieves would move in, vandals would move in and burn it down. Does that sound familiar? History repeats itself, doesn't it? So what they decided to do is just pull the whole thing down brick by brick and sell all the parts off. They were only a couple of years old. They were barely used. So they had a deconstruction demolition sale at one of the pubs in Norwich End. On the day they bought their stuff, and then they turned up on horses and carts, and they took away their fixtures and fittings, mantelpieces, columns, flooring, chimneys, marble fireplaces. We had the best of the best in there. I thought, how could they put up such a huge building so quickly in 2 years? They can't do that nowadays. Obviously, that's to our detriment, isn't it? We don't make them as fast as what we used to do. But they would have had huge teams of people. At the same time, remember when I told you that Samuel Grimshaw bought Irwood after the 1832 sale? The suggestion is that it's possible that he bought a lot of the fittings from Foster Bowers Lodge to build Earwood Hall with. It makes absolute sense. And that's the end of that era. And we come up now to the final era. Because what's happened is, 1836, when they took it down, nothing was on that side until 1904. Nothing. In 1904, Ramo, Colonel Henry Ramsden Cotton Jodrell, was the lord of the manor. He married Dorothy Lynch Jodrell, the niece of a nephew of a niece of a nephew of Francis Bower Jodrell there. There was no people, they were running out of families to pass these things on to. So it ended up in the estate of Ramsden Jodrell. He married her in 1902 and they set up their first home in Shallcross Manor, which they sold in 1924 to Edward Hall of Botany Bleach Works. Yeah, makes sense, yeah? In that period, the beginning of the 20th century, there was a period of regeneration of the Taxal and Shallcross estate farms and their buildings. Because after decades of neglect, of having nobody looking out for them as the estate manager, because there was nobody there at the main farm, at the main place, all the farm buildings started falling apart. They needed a land manager. They had nobody. So Ramo was making a new estate for himself. In Whaley Bridge Library, there are some documents written by the Amenity Society, a farm survey of 1967. They went round every farm on the Jodrell estate at the time and interviewed each farmer, asked them where they come from, what they were farming, experience, what they knew about it, and that's when I started seeing the name Toller, the farm manager Toller. At Shallcross Hall Farm, the lady there at the time, she remembers Captain Toller and she said he was a really fair and good estate manager. So they had somebody to pay their dues to and the taxes and everything. So this was part of farming life, the estate manager. Think about Emmerdale, you know, when they're at home farm. That's what they kind of were. So, in 1904, he builds a lodge on the footprint of Foster Bowers Lodge. The site was vacant for 60 years. There was nothing there. He appointed his friend, Major Thomas Clayton Toller, T.C. Toller. And there you see him as an old man. He was the chair of Cheshire County Council just before he died. And there's Ramo there. And he builds this lodge house for him as a quick job, probably using stone from various farms around the estate. He builds this lodge, which is why it's got various different wall buildings on it. It's a very strange layout, the Taxal Lodge at the moment. When Toller left, the Ramsden Jodrells moved in. They sold off Taxal Manor and they moved into Toller's Lodge. And they extended the library to Foster Bowers' original size, 30 feet long. And I'm going to show you why now. And the evidence I've got for this is this 1929 Taxal. This photo was taken in 1915. It was part of the Jodrell estate sale in 1923. Yeah, 1923. 1832, 1923. The catalogue was showing everything on the Jodrell estates, every farm, everything, all the way. As far as Furness Vale, the farms were included in this sale. I've got a copy of this sale catalogue. I'm sure some people have got it as well. It's very in-depth. It tells you the acreage, the roods and the perches. Acreage, roods and perches, the whole size. And this was taken roughly about 1915. You'll see the new drive there. The trees are pretty low down there. And you'll see it's only quite short there. It's got a doorway there, and it's got some kind of mature trees there. Very picturesque. The extension was built in 1929, which is what that stone gives away. It was to commemorate when Downes and Jodrell upgraded, because the footprint of Foster Bower's huge lodge was still there. They built this on the site of Foster Bower's lodge. So they restored this to the same size, a single story, and they made a beautiful library out of it. And what you'll see here is the landscape gardens, and you see this low stone wall here? This is the flat lawn where the Elizabethan lodge was, Lodge 1. Sheila, I think you remember this.
I do, yeah.
What is it? Is it a bird bath?
It was a sundial.
A sundial, yeah.
But the children deconstructed it and rolled the stones down into
Oh,
the
yeah,
river.
that's it. But you see the steps going down into the lawn, and this goes down the hill right down to the river, where it comes down to the Jug and Spoon, if anybody knows about the Jug and Spoon. But you'll see, is it me, or does that look a bit wonky?
Yes.
It does, doesn't it? It's not me. But you see, it's quite an attractive building. In 1937, with war on the horizon, aeroplanes were dispatched to fly around the country taking photos of all the industrial installations around the country. Dams and manufactories, they needed to know where everything was. So if the Germans were coming to bomb something like Coventry, they knew what was being made at Coventry. So what they were looking for here was at the botany there, which was an important manufacturer of bleach, maybe other things, I don't know. So what you'll see here is the boat shape. Remember I told you about that boat shape? There it is there, with the round part on there. And you'll see the angle of the land here. You can see how it goes off steeply down the banking there. There's the path that comes at the side of Taxal Lodge cottages. Can everybody see? Can everybody see? It's hard to be in the right position. And you'll see it there, how it drops off down there. You'll see the beautiful gardens there. There's a sunken greenhouse there that was heated, so raising exotic fruits and vegetables. Every plot of inch of land. And then, of course, it was all landscaped here with exotic plants and bushes, roses. Workshops there, which would have been for the carriages, but then it became for the motorised vehicles. This was the, Sheila, was this the boiler house, wasn't it? It was the boiler house. Yes,
there was a garden, the gardener's shed, and there was a flat upstairs about where your residence was for a caretaker.
Yeah. So they were completely self-sustaining. They could grow everything they need. They had staff. They had people working for them, carpenters, blacksmiths. They were completely self-sufficient there. Another angle as well, you can see the actual angle of the hillside there. It falls down here so steep, you can't imagine it. You can't even see it now because the trees have all taken over and obliterated all this view now. You'll see they were able to, out of the land, they were able to construct this huge tennis court. And you'll see again the boat shape. And there, the footprint of Foster Bower's lodge there. And here the lawn, which is completely flat. But on the lawn, there's something there that I can see, well, I can't see, but that you don't know about. And that's where LiDAR map comes into play. Looking on the lawn here, you'll see, what's that? Here's Mrs. Downes and Jodrell there on the lawn, looking up at the aeroplane. She's a bit perturbed, she's very angry, she's very upset. I think that might be her husband there, and that's their, is it a Model T4, I don't know, a Ford car. She's written in pieces of paper, "Go away, who is it?" Question mark. Drop notes. She must have been so paranoid about this plane going over. She had no idea what it was for. Well, I would be, wouldn't you, if a plane was swirling over my house? So yeah, but that's a moment caught in time, which we're never going to see again. But look at these steps, I mean, these are so beautiful. There were so many little steps going down, and it was all for the enjoyment of the owners, walking through these beautiful woodlands with a pretty rivulet at the back. And in the 1923 sale of the Jodrell Estates, they were promoting Taxal Lodge in amongst all of the other farm buildings. And there you'll see down at the weir there in the Taxal River, and up there the lodge there, and there's that little piece of wall that's there. Can you see it? It's looking down. You cannot see this now because all of these trees have completely taken it over. This is how I know the upgrade was done in 1929. I went and took these photos a couple of days ago. You weren't in, Sheila, I checked. I'd seen this stone in the garden and I thought, well, hang on a minute, 1929, what's this all about? Suddenly, when I found out that Downes and Jodrell and his wife did the upgrade and sold Shellcross and moved into the lodge, they set their own mark on it. They commemorated it by making a stone. And at the front, onto Linglong's Road, it's here, there's this beautiful curved wall, and on the other side as well, and the tall Taxal gates. And I think they constructed that when they did their upgrade as well, and made a coping stone, because as you see, that stone there, it goes up like a pyramid, and that would have fitted perfectly on there. Taxal, 1929. So they sealed their upgrade in that year. And this is in the garden now. That's where it sits in the garden, the back garden. And you can see those beautiful steps, and through there you can just see the outline of the lodge as it is now. LiDAR map, X-ray for the land, basically. They have the ability now with cameras to scan over the land to a depth of 6 feet at the moment. The technology will go, which means they can see through the land at what's below the soil surface. And this is how I know that the lodge on the piece of ground here, behind Taxal Lodge cottages, that's how I know that was a half-timbered building with stone floors. Because LiDAR mapping shows no sign of any cellarage there. The cellars were under what's now Taxal Lodge here, as mentioned in that sale catalogue, that it had extensive cellars. Anybody been in the cellars at Taxal Lodge? I haven't, it's so scary. Well, you can't now, you can't go in there. Well, this proves to me that nothing was built of any substance on this flat piece of land, apart from that Elizabethan half-timbered lodge. You see, as maps increased and got better, more detail was put in. Sheila and I went looking for the well. There's a well there which where it would have got water from. This is the path that's now at the side of the lodge. It's there. Originally the boundary stood a bit further back. This is the path that they cut through in 1904, 1929 in front of lodge cottages. And you'll see that the path went straight to nothingness. That's where Foster Bowers Lodge stood, and nothing stood for 60 odd years. So this map was made in that time. And there you'll see, well, it's hard to see, but it's hard to read LiDAR map if you've not got your eyes trained. That's where lodge cottages are there. So that was my proof that where it was. The document that I've handed out to you on the table, if you want to turn it over and look at it now, if you want to, I've simplified all of that research I've been doing for the past 2 years into this little cheat sheet timescale, putting the owners, a little bit about them, into the buildings. The timescale, the building, the timescale, the people, Foster Bower, John Bower, Jodrell, and a little bit there. You're very welcome to keep those if it's of any use to you. If you don't want it, then just hand it back. But that's basically how I've encapsulated 800 years of history into one little piece of paper. It's very hard to understand it all. I appreciate that. As I say, I went there the other day. This is the site of it now. What a sad, dilapidated site. In 1950, when Ramo died, the whole of the lodge estate was sold off, and Stockport Education Authority purchased it as a school for disturbed young adults. They built an extension on top of the extension there. You'll see it's rather ugly. And they built other bits on as well. And by now, It's so dilapidated, it's only fit for demolition. It's extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous. There's no way I'd go in it. But what a sad shame. When you think about it, in those couple of 100 years, 3 buildings, and all of them have all ended up being to rack and ruin. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the talk. And I hope you